Today we're going to be looking at a dry cooking method called roasting. Now, before we get into that technique, I want to show you another technique that comes with roasting, because most of the times when we're roasting a fairly large piece of meat that is already somewhat tender, and to help maintain that shape, we look at tying. So we have a pork loin today that we're looking at, and the first step you want to take is just take the end of the twine, the butcher's twine, and make a tie. We then average the intervals that we are going to tie, and what you do is you bring it down, you bring the butcher twine down to the center, and we basically hold it in the center and bring it around the protein. Take this free piece of twine, hold the center, and pull it through, almost like sewing a little bit. Again, I'm going to take my thumb and just hold the center, take the free piece of the twine and go around, take it around the loin. Take the empty piece, pull it through like if we're sewing with a needle. Give a little bit of a pull to the center so that we keep it really nice and uniform. But it's not finished there. We need to ensure that we turn it over and do the same thing. Same technique again. Going underneath and pulling it down. Right, now that's nice. Turn it back over to the presentation side, and I'm going to take the two loose pieces of twine and tie it together. The next thing with respect to our meats is that you always want to season with a little bit of light salt and pepper, irregardless of whether we're going to do a rub or a marinade. So a little bit of salt and pepper. Why we're doing this? Because again, we want to layer our flavors. Now, what is roasting? Roasting is a dry cooking method. You have different ways of browning your meat, and once we brown our meat, in this case pan-seared, we are going to finish it in the oven. So let's start with a little bit of oil. You want to ensure that the pan is nice and hot so we get that searing going on. That nice caramelization is happening. At the end of the day, you do not want to put you didn't see me put any liquid or any water to wash the meat. Sometimes in the Caribbean, we always feel that we need to rinse our meats either with lime or vinegar or flour. None of that applies to U.S. meats, pork and beef, because the process that goes through in the plant is world class and food safe. So when we get these products that are already broken down in cryovac, all you want to do is pat it dry and start the process of salting and peppering. Once you rinse it, you open yourself to removing all the bacteria and exposing it to either cross-contamination of other bacteria that are on other surfaces. You want to ensure when you are searing, pan-searing that is, that you brown all sides of the meat. Let's just say in the real world, because sometimes we have things that are happening in kitchens where all stoves are being used and we need to get roasting done. Doesn't always have to happen on a pan. It can happen in a really high heat oven, anywhere from 400 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. You put the meat in, you make sure it's salted and peppered lightly, and within the first 15 minutes, you're going to get this lovely golden caramelization happening. You want to check it as well to ensure that the oven is working properly, and if it takes a little bit longer, that's okay. We're going to finish it in the oven. So a couple additional points to note while we're roasting. So we've completed the searing on the outside to go into the oven. But once we put it in the oven at a high heat, we need for about 15 to 20 minutes to get this type of coloring on the surface of the protein. You want to lower the oven and allow the roast to continue to cook. You also need to take into consideration, this is a nice lean piece of meat, so you may need to baste it periodically in the oven to get flavor and moisture. You just want to continue to keep that layering happening. Once that has been done, you leave it to complete its roasting time. And you want to ensure something like pork, which in terms of maximum temperature, you want to get it to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. But we have something that we call carryover cooking time, which means that when we pull our roast out of the oven, it's still going to continue to cook. So what's the best temperature to pull it out at? I would say roughly 135 degrees Fahrenheit. When you pull it out of the oven, it is still continuing to cook. Those juices are still moving around. You want them to stabilize and settle so that the moisture stays within the product and not on the plate. And then we end up with a dry product. This is called thermalization. Another option for larger cuts for roasting, for example, a leg of pork, would be adding some really great aromatics on the bottom. Onions, carrots, celery, even a couple slivers of garlic and thyme. Why? It does two things. It prevents the roast from sticking, but then as that roasting process is happening, cooking, and all the natural juices and basting is happening, you really create a lovely base for a great sauce. Okay, so our roast is out of the oven, our pork loin, and we're going to check it with a thermometer. We look to make sure we have that 10-degree cooking time, carryover cooking time, so we're pulling it at 135. Little couple of notes to point with a thermometer. You're not putting it to the end. You get to the center and you want to go in at least halfway in and allow yourself to read it and make sure. So this is perfect, perfectly cooked. We're going to finish now by putting a little tent on the ends. What does this do? Because we're still carrying over cooking, we're going to allow all of the juices that on the outside to kind of settle towards the inside and just relax in the meat. We end up with a really juicy, full flavored pork tenderloin. And that is how you roast.